There's a glue that holds societies together, a force that binds cultures, gives them cohesion, and keeps them from unraveling at the seams. And when that glue fails, societies fracture, cultures splinter, and empires crumble. This vital glue is called social cohesion, and it's a concept every world builder needs to understand. Why? Because it's at the heart of creating believable cultures and empires, the kind that feels alive and enduring in your stories. Today, we're diving deep into social cohesion, what it is, why it matters, and how you can use it to enrich your fantasy worlds. We'll draw inspiration from history and tie it into the Imperial World Building series we've been exploring here on Just in Time World Building. Welcome to another episode of Fantasy World Building with your host, Marie Mullaney. While I've touched on social cohesion in a few past videos, like the one on rituals I released around Christmas, I realized that it's such a big and important topic that it deserves a video all on its own. So we're hitting pause on the life cycle of empires to focus specifically on social cohesion and its critical role in culture building this week. At its core, social cohesion is the sense of unity within a society. It's what keeps a culture connected and functioning, driven by shared values, trust, inclusion, and cooperation among its people, and between those people and the institutions that govern them. Think of it as the framework that prevents your fantasy society from collapsing into chaos, or as the fault lines that could one day cause it to fracture. The key elements of social cohesion are what bind a society together or tear it apart, and there are, to my mind, 4 of them. First, and possibly most important, shared identity. This is the cultural glue, things like traditions, religion, mythology, or even a common language that gives society a sense of we. It is what makes individuals feel as though they're part of a collective whole. For example, a fantasy kingdom might rally around a legendary hero or a sacred prophecy, uniting its people across generations. Secondly, inclusion and integration are pretty important to the maintenance of social cohesion. A cohesive society can integrate outsiders while maintaining its core identity. This means it can embrace some internal diversity without losing that overarching sense of unity. Imagine a fantasy city-state that welcomes traders and adventurers, but still preserves its deeply rooted cultural traditions. Balance is kind of key here. Okay. Third, the mutual obligations of a society is an important element in social cohesion. These are the unspoken or formalized bonds that tie people together, whether it be a feudal system, military service, patron-client relationships. These obligations create a sense of interconnectedness. We're all in this together and we owe each other loyalty and support. For instance, a dwarven society might have strict codes of honor and debt, reinforcing their tight-knit community. And last, but certainly not least, trust is a critical component of social cohesion. This is the faith people place in their fellow citizens, their leaders, institutions, or even divine mandates. Trust is the foundation of social cohesion, and when it starts to break down, when rulers become corrupt, institutions falter, or the gods themselves are called into question, social cohesion unravels. A fractious human empire riddled with corruption and mistrust would behave very differently from a tightly knit dwarven community, or even from an island society of elves who bask in the sun but share a sense of community. In storytelling, social cohesion breathes life into your fictional cultures. That dwarf clan, with its shared rituals and strong sense of community, will naturally act very differently from that human empire on the brink of collapse, or from that laid-back island where trust and camaraderie flow as freely as the tides. These distinctions all come down to the levels of social cohesion and how that cohesion is built or destroyed. Now that we understand what social cohesion is, the next question is, what role does it play in the rise and fall of empires? Since we do want to tie this in to that series. So let's explore how this concept ties into that life cycle. Empires don't just rise and fall. They evolve, and at every stage of their life cycle, social cohesion plays a pivotal role. To explore this, let's revisit that life cycle of empires as outlined in The Fate of Empires by John Glubb. Empires rise through conquest, peak with prosperity, and ultimately decline, and social cohesion is the thread that weaves through that. As we discussed in Birth of Empires, which you can check out in the info card, in the early stage of empire, the core culture of empire, which is now expansionistic, has an incredibly high cohesion. This cohesion is built on shared identity, a sense of destiny, and strong institutions that embody the values of the culture. The conquered peoples may have lower cohesion, but the empire's core culture is rock solid. Take early Rome, for example. The Romans didn't just conquer, they assimilated. They entered new territories and Romanized them, creating a shared identity that bound the republic together. Their institutions were strong and their leaders embodied the virtues their culture admired. And this was the glue that held the early Roman Republic together. Even the military contributed to the social cohesion, and armies often do this. They often act as a microcosm of society. Soldiers from diverse regions bond over shared experiences, from fighting battles to celebrating victories or commiserating in defeat. Early empires frequently relied on their military not just for conquest, but also as a unifying force. Now, during this phase, the imperial culture is very robust. The people of the empire believe in themselves and their shared destiny. They have overcome adversity, they trust their leaders, and they feel like they're ready to take on the world. And this trust and shared purpose are part of what creates the cohesion necessary for empire building. Then, as empires grow and flourish, they reach their peak, but this prosperity comes with hidden fractures. At this stage, the empire is thriving by incorporating diverse cultures, but the more it incorporates, the more its core culture begins to dilute. The early cohesion that was so strong in the conquest phase starts to weaken. Wealth becomes another factor weakening cohesion. While prosperity increases across the empire, it's not distributed equally. Wealth accumulates faster in the hands of the elite, while the lower classes see slower gains. And inequality begins to rise, though it may be masked by the empire's overall success, and this plants the seeds of division. Another critical change during the peak phase is that of the bureaucracy. When early empires relied on personal bonds and dynamic leadership, peak empires depend on sprawling bureaucratic institutions. And these institutions can be efficient, but they can also feel impersonal and rigid. The average citizen may start to see the bureaucracy as a massive, uncaring structure, eroding their trust in the system. And you can check out how to build a bureaucracy in the information card. Rome again offers a clear example of this kind of cohesion starting to unravel. In the early Republic phase, Rome was all about shared growth. We're in this together. But as the empire expanded, wealth and inequality widened. The patricians no longer needed the plebeians, relying instead on the labor of slaves brought back from their conquests. The social contract between elites and commoners started to break down. And that takes us to when an empire begins to decline, social cohesion collapses. The core culture can no longer integrate outsiders under the shared identity. Every additional cultural group added to the empire further fractures the cohesion of the core. And at this point, the trust in institution and leadership is often completely eroded. Rome's decline is a textbook example. I'm talking Republic's decline. By its later years, the Republic had transformed into a state that served only the elite. The disparity between patricians and plebeians became unbearable. Political agitators like the Gracchi brothers seized on this inequality, and figures like Caesar rose to power, ultimately ending the Republic with the support of the disenfranchised plebeians. The institutions of the empire had become so rigid and corrupt that people no longer believed they served them. Corruption ran rampant, and the bonds of trust between citizens, between leaders, and between the people and their government had completely disintegrated. And this pattern isn't unique to Rome. The Chinese dynasties also followed a similar cycle, described as losing the mandate of heaven. When social cohesion faltered, a new imperial house would rise, restarting the cycle with conquest and renewed unity. Obviously, there might be some people who feel like this is very present today, and I get that, but bear in mind that these are just historical patterns. This is not a predictive model. Chill. We are not in the end days of the empire or the end days of the republic or anything like that. I'm just discussing the kind of overall pattern that happens with social cohesion and the causes behind it and so on. Okay? Don't come at me. Okay. Okay. What does all this mean for you, the fantasy world builder? So when creating your fantasy empire, ask yourself, where is the empire in its life cycle? Is it in the conquest phase? And the core culture will be cohesive, full of energy, and ready to assimilate others. In the peak phase, there will still be cohesion, but cracks will start to form. Wealth inequality will rise, institutions will become more impersonal, and so on. And in the decline phase, cohesion will be a distant memory, and your empire will be riddled with corruption and mistrust. That is, of course, where it's great to put a revolution, just on a side note. Anyway, regardless of the setting, whether it's medieval fantasy or a modern magical society or even a sci-fi empire, the dynamics of social cohesion remain relevant. The tipping point often lies where the lower classes find what unbearable. When the majority of the population feels left behind or oppressed, change becomes inevitable, often culminating in revolutionary change of government structures. And speaking of revolutions, if you want my thoughts on how to handle them in your world building, check out the information card on that topic. How do you use social cohesion in your fantasy world building? Let me know in the comments if you've implemented some kind of social cohesion in your cultures. And if you're curious about my own implementation of social cohesion and empires, and you want to support the channel financially, check out my books linked in the description of the video. I have an epic fantasy series that explores how the past influences the present. I have a science fantasy series that explores social stagnation and growth. And I have a rollicking good time if you like spicy novellas, because I have Under Talia Tethers, a series of novellas that explores pure spice. Sometimes it's not about the theme. Okay, enough of that. Let's dive into how social structures can strengthen or weaken social cohesion. One of the most powerful forces in shaping social cohesion is religion. Religion acts as a unifying or dividing force depending on its role within the culture. It provides moral code, shared rituals, and even explanations for the empire's rise or its decline. A strong dynamic religion can make a culture highly cohesive, while an old corrupt religion can tear that cohesion apart. For example, if the priests in your fantasy culture are more focused on serving their own interests than meeting the spiritual needs of the people, that religion becomes a weight on social cohesion. Elites may exploit the religion's bureaucracy for their own benefit, leaving common people disillusioned. Historically, this was one of the factors that fueled the Reformation in Europe. The religion that once unified became a divisive force, benefiting the elite. Religion, much like empires, goes through its own life cycle, where cohesion can shatter under the weight of corruption. So when creating religions in your world, ask yourself, how cohesive do you want this culture to be? A dynamic and integrated religion strengthens cohesion, while a corrupt or fragmented one weakens it. Then, economic systems and wealth distribution also impact cohesion. And we've touched on wealth distribution before, but it is worth emphasizing. Economic systems are tightly tied to social cohesion. Wealth inequality in particular can shatter social bonds. If wealth accumulates in the hands of a small group of elites, while the majority of people suffer, those at the bottom begin to question the value of society. And this creates dangerous fault lines. Take Rome as an example. During its decline, the patricians no longer needed the plebeians for labor because of their conquest and taking of battle loot. Wealth inequality became unbearable, and the plebeians felt utterly disenfranchised. That inequality created the conditions for political agitators like the Gracchi and Caesar, who used that discontent to push through radical change. History shows us time and again that when people lose hope, they are primed for revolution. They become a tinderbox waiting for a leader to tell them, it's not your fault, your culture has screwed you over and you should take it back. This is not about modern politics, it is about patterns. If wealth inequality reaches a level where the non-elite class considers it unbearable, it breaks social cohesion. Have you explored wealth inequality in your world? What does it look like for non-humans if you've gone there on that level? Let me know in the comments. And let's turn to knowledge and education. The control of knowledge and education also plays a key role in social cohesion. In the early stages of empire, knowledge is often shared and people have similar access to information. This creates unity. As knowledge spreads, philosophical differences emerge, which can lead to some loss of cohesion. But the real trouble begins when elites restrict knowledge to maintain power. Cutting off lower classes from education stifles social mobility, and wars or corruption can destroy knowledge altogether. In a fragmented society where no one has a coherent understanding of shared truths, social cohesion disintegrates. When crafting your fantasy world, consider how accessible knowledge is and how it affects social mobility and cohesion. Going back to the Reformation that we spoke about, one of the big factors that led to it was the invention of the printing press and the democratization of knowledge that resulted, specifically knowledge of the Bible. Elites no longer had all the control of knowledge, and as such, the printing press exposed the cracks and led to the religious revolution called the Reformation. Or at least it was one of the factors in the Reformation. I know, look, it's a multifaceted, nuanced, complicated thing. Anyway. Editing Marie here. I realized that I did not explain the knowledge section very well. The problem with knowledge is when it fractures within your society, you start getting this disunity and lack of cohesion. But also, if your society is built on controlled knowledge, so people are told what they should know, or they are simply given the information without the source content, then your social cohesion lags behind.
But if you then gain some kind of input that gives people access to knowledge that they did not previously have, like direct source knowledge, then that changes the social cohesion dynamic, because it can destroy the trust that people had in the institutions that previously gave them knowledge. I hope that that clears up what I was trying to say in this knowledge section.
The next point is military and civic duty. Shared service in military or civic institutions is another powerful tool for building social cohesion. This isn't just about armies. It could also include civilian service, where members of a culture contribute to the administration or well-being of their society. These shared experiences instill cohesive values and create bonds between individuals. Take Finland, for example. We require that our young men serve a term in the military, and many of the Finnish men speak of this time as a formative bonding experience. In a fantasy setting, a similar system could create strong cohesion among citizens. However, as empires decline, this shared service is often replaced by mercenaries or paid substitutes. When only elites benefit from these institutions, cohesion deteriorates. And then finally, shared rituals and festivals are one of the simplest, most effective ways to build social cohesion. Rituals reinforce cultural bonds and remind people of their shared identity. When these traditions are neglected or forgotten, the fault lines within a society begin to show. And I discussed this at length on my video on rituals, which I released over Christmas, and you can check that out in the information card for a deeper dive. But in essence, festivals and rituals act as a glue that hold a culture together. Whether it's a midwinter festival or a coming-of-age ceremony, these shared experiences suppress the ego and promote the collective identity. Social cohesion is the heartbeat of a culture and of an empire. From religion to wealth distribution, to knowledge, to civic duty, festivals and rituals, it all shapes the rise and fall of cultures. Whether you're writing about an empire on the rise or one teetering on collapse, or an isolated kingdom or a city-state and its culture, you have to consider what social cohesion exists in that culture, how is it maintained, and is it busy fracturing? Is it busy strengthening? Is it peak? So, where is your culture in its social cohesion journey? How does it maintain cohesion? And what forces are pulling that cohesion apart? Let me know in the comments. If you have questions about this topic that you'd like me to answer, join my quarterly newsletter for exclusive insights, giveaways, a Q&A section, and behind-the-scenes content. The link is in the description, so sign up today and don't miss out. And thank you very much to all the members of this channel who not only get early access to these videos, but also help me feed my cats every day. A very big shout out to Lupix Lakeshire, Katie Kofi Mug, and Tony Lamanna, just-in-timers of the Build It in Stone level, and Pablo Barrios, Patricio, Ayas Shami Maru, Tiffany Felix, and Dylan Batera, just-in-timers of the Build It in Wood level. If you're hungry for more world building, check out my video on how changes in technology affect the culture, or whatever the algorithm is recommending for you right now, and I will see you soon for another episode from Just in Time World Building.